Hey guys, tonight we begin with one of the most complex, disciplined and majestic civilizations in world history, Imperial China. The Forbidden City gleams under the morning sun, red walls, golden roofs, centuries of power frozen in silk and stone. Beautiful, isn't it? Now, forget everything you just imagined. Because if you were born in Imperial China, you wouldn't see any of that. You'd smell it first. The chamber pots emptied into open gutters. The unwashed bodies packed into courtyard slums. The smoke from burning coal that never quite leaves your lungs. You open your eyes. That's your first mistake. Before you've even stood up, before you've scratched the flea bites on your ankles, before you've taken 3 full breaths, you've already failed. Failed to bow correctly. Failed to address your father by his proper title. Failed to remember that in this world, you don't belong to yourself. You belong to the Empire. And the Empire has plans for you. Plans that involve 18-hour workdays. Plans that involve exams designed to break your mind. Plans that involve laws written in bamboo and enforced with bamboo, usually across your back, until you can't stand. You think you'd survive? You think your modern instincts would save you? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you wore the wrong color and it got you killed? Didn't think so. Stay until the end. Because by the time we're done, you'll understand why baby girls in some villages were simply left by the river. Not because their parents were monsters, because the alternative was watching them starve slowly. What could you possibly do in your first 5 minutes on Earth to deserve that? Nothing. That's the point. Hit subscribe if you're brave enough to find out what happens next. And like this video, before the Empire decides you didn't. Let's find out why you wouldn't last a day in Imperial China. You don't remember being born. Nobody does. But in Imperial China, your first breath wasn't just a medical event. It was a census entry, a tax calculation, a social sentence stamped before you could cry for mercy. The midwife didn't ask your name. She asked your father's. She asked your grandfather's. She asked which village, which district, which province claimed ownership of your tiny, squirming body. And somewhere in a government office you'd never see, a scribe dipped brush in ink and added one more unit to the Empire's endless ledger of human resources. You were already counted, already filed, already owned. The social pyramid of Imperial China wasn't a metaphor, it was architecture. Stone layered on stone, with the emperor perched at the peak like a dragon who'd forgotten the rest of the mountain existed. They called him the Son of Heaven, which sounds poetic until you realize heaven never took meetings, never answered complaints, and never explained why the crops failed, or the river flooded, or your father died before you turned 7. The emperor ruled by the mandate of heaven, a beautiful theory that basically meant, as long as things go well, he's divine. The moment things go wrong, well, heaven changed its mind. Time for a new dynasty. Time for new bones under old walls. Beneath him sat the scholar officials, men who'd spent their youth hunched over bamboo scrolls until their spines curved like question marks and their eyes forgot how to see distance. They'd memorized Confucius until Confucius leaked from their dreams. They quoted philosophy at meals, at funerals, at moments when everyone just wanted to eat in peace. They passed the imperial exams, the original gatekeeping mechanism, and spent the rest of their lives ensuring no one else got through without paying the same toll in youth and hope. Then came the farmers. Confucius himself said farmers should be respected. They fed the empire after all. They rose before birds, worked until their hands became maps of cracks and calluses, and handed most of what they grew to landlords who'd never touched a shovel. Respect sounded nice. Respect didn't fill empty stomachs when the harvest failed. Respect didn't stop tax collectors from taking the grain stored for winter. Respect was the empire's way of saying thank you while taking everything else. Below farmers, the artisans. Potters who shaped clay until their fingers forgot straight. weavers who turned silk into poetry while their own children wore hemp, paper makers, fan makers, builders of things the empire needed but never quite trusted. Useful hands, the scholars called them. Not quite respectable hands, but useful. And below them merchants. Oh, the merchants. Rich as emperors in everything but name. Silk robes, silver belts, houses with multiple courtyards, and servants who served on actual knees. But according to Confucian values, making profit from other people's labor was morally slippery. You could own half the province and still be treated like a tax-evading raccoon who'd sneaked into the banquet through the kitchen. Wealth without virtue, money without manners. The empire took their taxes, spent their silver, and never let them forget they were essentially well-dressed parasites. Then the basement. Soldiers who fought and died for an empire that billeted them in slums. Servants who existed to be unseen. Butchers who handled death and were therefore death-adjacent and unclean. Actors who pretended to be people and were therefore less than people. Criminals branded on the face so everyone knew, always, what they'd done. And women? Women weren't even on the pyramid. Women were the ground the pyramid stood on, the dirt beneath the stones. Born to obey fathers, handed to husbands, expected to produce sons who'd grow up to obey more men. If you were female, your life wasn't a journey. It was a transfer of ownership with occasional breaks for childbirth. This wasn't cruelty. This was order. The empire believed, truly, deeply, religiously believed, that everyone had a place. That knowing your place and staying in it was the highest form of virtue. That the man who accepted his station with grace was more noble than the merchant who climbed above his. That harmony meant stillness. That stillness meant control. That control meant survival. And for 2,000 years it worked. For the people at the top, it worked beautifully. For everyone else, it worked like gravity works, indifferent to who falls, unconcerned with who breaks. You didn't choose your stone in that pyramid. You didn't earn it. You didn't even know it existed until you opened your eyes and realized the weight above you wasn't going anywhere. Your father's station became your station. His debts became your debts. His enemies became your blood feud. His dreams, if he'd been foolish enough to keep any, became your inheritance. The empire looked at you, one brand new human with a whole life unlived, and decided everything that mattered about you before you could hold your head up on your own. And the terrifying part? You believed them. Everyone did. Because when the entire world tells you, from your first breath to your last, that you are exactly where you belong, that the suffering is natural, that the hierarchy is divine, that the man above you deserves to be there, and the man below you deserves to stay there, you don't question it. You don't even think to question it. You just bow. You just work. You just hope your children might climb one stone higher. If you bow low enough, work hard enough, pray long enough to ancestors who never answered anyway. That was the genius of Imperial China. Not the walls. Not the armies. Not the exams or the taxes or the torture. The genius was making everyone believe the pyramid was holy. That your place in it was fate. That you'd earned it somehow, in some life you couldn't remember, for some sin you never committed. And the worst part, the part that keeps historians awake, is that maybe they were right. Maybe some people are born to rule and some to serve. Maybe the universe does have a ladder, and you just happen to be born holding the bottom rung. But here's the question they never answered. If heaven designed the pyramid, why did heaven always sit at the top? Why did the gods always look like emperors? Why did fate always favor the ones holding the whips? You'll have plenty of time to wonder about that later. Right now, you need to get up. The rooster's been screaming for minutes. Your father's voice is coming from the next room. And if you're not on your knees bowing before he finishes your name, you'll learn something the empire teaches better than anything else. There are worse places than the bottom of the pyramid. There are places they put people who forget which stone they're supposed to be. The rooster doesn't just crow in Imperial China, it screams. Right outside your window, close enough that you feel it in your chest, loud enough that you forget, for one merciful second, where you are. Then the village bell joins in. Clang, clang, clang. Like heaven itself is angry, you're still horizontal. You open your eyes. That's your first obligation of the day. Existing. But existing isn't enough. Before you can stand, before you can stretch, before you can even remember your own name, you must bow. Not to God, not to some abstract deity who might forgive you if you forget. To your father. He's standing in the doorway, already dressed, already judging. You bow. Then your mother appears behind him. You bow again. Then your grandfather shuffles in, leaning on a stick, clearing his throat like he's about to deliver a sermon on why young people today don't respect tradition. You bow lower. Then your older brother. Then your uncle. Then the ancestral tablet mounted on the wall, which is basically a wooden plank with names carved into it. But you bow to that too, because that wooden plank contains the souls of everyone who died to put you here. And they're watching, always watching, and they have opinions about your posture. This is filial piety, and it's not a suggestion, it's not a cultural quirk, it's the glue holding the empire together. And if that glue weakens because you were too stiff-backed to bend properly, the whole dynasty could theoretically collapse. No pressure. By the time you reach the breakfast mat, you've bowed approximately 40 times. Your knees ache. Your lower back sends polite complaints to your brain. You haven't spoken a word yet because you're not allowed to speak until spoken to, and so far, no one has spoken to you. They've only looked at you, assessed you, judged your bowing angle and found it acceptable, barely. Now you kneel, not sit, kneel, on a woven mat that does nothing to protect your bones from the hard earth below. Chairs are for rich people. Chairs are for scholars who've earned the right to have their spines supported. You haven't earned anything yet. You kneel, and you wait. Breakfast arrives. A servant brings it, some cousin twice removed who draws the short straw every morning. But before you can reach for the bowl, your father clears his throat. You freeze, hands suspended. Did you reach before he did? Did you forget that the oldest eats first? Did you just commit a social crime punishable by shame that will follow you until the ancestors themselves disown you? No. You remembered. Barely. Your hand returns to your lap. Your father eats. Then your mother. Then your grandfather, slowly, deliberately, making sure you watch every single bite. Then your older brother. Then your uncle. Then, finally, when everyone above you has finished, you're allowed to touch the bowl. The congee inside is cold now, but you eat it anyway, quickly, silently, because meals aren't for conversation. Meals aren't for sharing dreams, or complaining about the landlord, or mentioning that you cried last night, thinking about the imperial exams you'll never take because your family can't afford the tutor. Meals are for fueling the body so the body can work, that's all. You are a stomach with legs, and right now that stomach needs warm rice, but warm rice is a luxury, so cold rice-flavored water will have to do. You glance up once. Your father catches you. His eyes narrow. You look down immediately. Too slow. You'll hear about that later. The disrespect of eye contact during meals. The arrogance of thinking you're equal enough to meet his gaze. You'll bow extra low tonight to make up for it. You'll bow until your forehead touches the floor and your nose fills with dust, and you remember, viscerally, that you are small, that you have always been small, that you will die small unless the empire decides otherwise, which it won't. Because here's the thing about Imperial China that the history books don't emphasize enough. The system isn't just about keeping you in line. It's about making you forget there was ever a line to cross. It's about making obedience feel like instinct, like breathing, like the only possible way to exist. By the time breakfast ends, you've been awake for 2 hours. You've bowed to 12 people. You've knelt through an entire meal without speaking. You've watched everyone above you eat while you waited, hungry, patient, trained, and you haven't once thought about rebelling. You haven't once wondered if things could be different. Because somewhere between your first bow and your last spoonful of cold congee, the Empire won. You're not a person anymore. You're a position, a role, a stone in the pyramid, exactly where stones are supposed to be. And the terrifying part? You're grateful. Grateful to be fed. Grateful to have a mat to kneel on. Grateful that your father only looked at you instead of reaching for the bamboo rod leaning against the wall. Outside, the village stirs. Other families are waking. Other sons are bowing. Other daughters are learning, quietly, that their bodies don't belong to them either. The Empire hums with morning activity, millions of people all moving in the same direction, all thinking the same thoughts, all grateful for the same small mercies. And somewhere, in a palace you'll never see, the Emperor yawns. His breakfast arrives on gold. His bows are performed by professionals. His knees never ache. But you don't think about him. You don't have time. Because your father just stood up, and that means you stand up, and that means the day is officially beginning, and the day means work, and work means survival. And survival means forgetting that you ever wondered what it might feel like to just stay kneeling. Just for a moment. Just to feel what disobedience tastes like. But you won't. You can't. The Empire didn't build walls around your city. It built walls inside your head. And right now, as you rise on aching knees and follow your father out the door, you can't even see them anymore. Just the next bow. Just the next meal. Just the next day. Just the next. Always the next. Because in Imperial China, the present doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everyone who came before. And they're all watching, all judging, all waiting for you to forget your place so they can remind you, in ways that leave marks, exactly where you belong. But first, breakfast dishes. Someone has to clean them, and it's not going to be your father. Get moving. The ancestors are getting restless. You're halfway out the door when your mother's voice catches you. Not loud, never loud. Just there, like a thread pulling you back. You turn. She's standing by the breakfast mat, not looking at you, looking at the floor, looking anywhere but your face. And you know, before she speaks, you know. The dishes. You forgot the dishes. Your father keeps walking. He doesn't turn, doesn't wait. He heard her too, but he's a man, and men don't do dishes, and men certainly don't linger while their sons learn the first real lesson of Imperial Chinese survival. There is always more work. Always. The moment you think you're done, something else appears. A task you missed. A duty you neglected. A person whose existence you temporarily forgot to acknowledge. You pad back to the mat on bare feet. Kneel again. Knees screaming now. Really screaming. Like they're developing personalities, and all of them hate you. The bowls sit where you left them. Rough ceramic. A single chopstick fallen to the floor. The remains of congee hardening into something that looks like paste and feels like shame. You wash them in the corner basin. The water is cold. It's always cold. Heating water for dishes is for people who don't understand that fuel costs money, and money isn't something your family has. You scrape the dried congee with your thumbnail. The bowl fights back. It's been used for decades, this bowl. Cracked once and repaired with rice glue. Your grandmother used it. Her mother before her. Someday, if you survive, your children will use it. The bowl will outlast you. The bowl has already outlasted people you never met. While you work, you think about food. Not the congee you just ate. Can you even call that eating? But real food. Meat. You've heard descriptions. Rich people eat meat. Scholars eat meat on festival days. The emperor probably eats meat every single meal. Multiple meats. Meats arranged into shapes. Meats you can't name because you've never seen them. Pork belly, someone once whispered. Like pork, but with the fat still attached. The fat melting on your tongue. The fat doing things that plain rice could never do. You'll never taste it. You know this. Not because you're pessimistic, but because you're realistic. Your family's status is written in your bones. Written in your father's bones before you. Written in his father's bones before that. Meat is for people who don't have to ask what it costs. Your mother appears behind you. You don't hear her coming. She moves like smoke, like she learned centuries ago that women who make noise get noticed, and women who get noticed get used. But you feel her, the weight of her attention. You turn, bowl in hand, water dripping from your fingers. She looks at the bowl, nods once. Acceptable. Then she does something strange. She reaches out and touches your face, just for a second. Her palm against your cheek, rough as burlap, warm despite everything. You freeze. Physical affection it's not something that happens. Not here. Not in this house. There are rules about touching. Hierarchies of contact. Mothers don't touch sons who've passed a certain age because sons become men, and men belong to the empire, not to the women who birthed them. But she touches you anyway, just once, just long enough for you to see something in her eyes that you can't name, something that looks almost like grief. Then she pulls away and she's gone, back to wherever women go when men are working, when the household needs running, when there are 1,000 invisible tasks that keep the family alive and no one will ever thank her for any of them. You stand there, wet-handed, confused, holding a bowl that's older than everyone in this room, except maybe the ancestors whose names you bow to every morning. And for one strange moment you wonder, what did she want? What was she trying to say with that touch that she couldn't say with words? But you don't wonder long. You can't. Wondering leads to questions, and questions lead to thoughts, and thoughts lead to the kind of awareness that gets people disappeared. You've heard stories. Everyone has. Men who asked too many questions about why things are the way they are. Women who looked at their husbands a certain way and never looked at anything again. Children who spoke out of turn and became examples, lessons carved into flesh so everyone would remember. Curiosity is the first step toward rebellion, and rebellion is the first step toward death. You put the bowl away. You dry your hands on your tunic. It's already dirty. What's a little more dirt? And you head for the door. Your father is waiting. The fields are waiting. The empire is waiting. But as you step outside, you catch a smell. Coming from somewhere. Cooking. Real cooking. Meat. Someone, somewhere, is eating well today. A landlord. A scholar. A merchant who made the right deal and bought his way past the shame of his profession. Someone who doesn't kneel until their knees bleed. Someone who eats first, eats hot, eats enough. You stand there for a moment, just breathing it in, the smell of a life you'll never have. Then your father calls your name. Not loud, never loud. Just there, like a thread pulling you forward. And you go. Because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. That's what you'll do until you're too old to work, or too sick to stand, or too unlucky to survive the next famine, the next tax increase, the next war that needs bodies and doesn't care whose bodies they take. You go. And you never look back at the house where your mother touched your face like she was saying goodbye to someone who wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not for years, maybe. But eventually. Everyone leaves eventually. The empire makes sure of that. And somewhere behind you, in a kitchen you'll never see again after today, a woman who raised you from nothing eats her breakfast alone. Cold congee. Hardened edges. No one to bow to her. No one to wash her bowl. That's the part they don't put in the history books. The poetry? They remember the poetry. The philosophy? Carved in stone. The emperors? Statues everywhere. But the women who touched their sons' faces one last time because they knew, somehow, that the empire was already counting the days until those sons became soldiers or laborers or corpses. No one writes poems about them. No one even remembers their names. But right now, standing in the morning light with the smell of someone else's meat in your nose and your father's voice in your ears, you almost remember. Almost. There was something in her eyes, something you can't name, something you'll think about years from now, if you live that long, in some frozen moment when everything else has been stripped away. But the dishes are waiting, and the fields won't plough themselves, and the Empire doesn't care about your mother's eyes. The Empire never cared about anything except the next tax, the next harvest, the next generation of boys who'll learn, just like you learned, that breakfast isn't about being fed. It's about remembering you're hungry. Always hungry. Forever hungry. And the only way to survive is to stop noticing. The tunic hits your skin like a punishment you forgot you deserved. Hemp. Always hemp. Coarse, scratchy, woven from stalks that went from field to fabric without ever learning what softness means. You pull it over your head, and the fibers catch on every patch of skin that survived childhood with even a shred of sensitivity left. Your shoulders. Your neck. The soft place behind your knees where mosquitoes always find you. The tunic finds them too. It finds every vulnerable spot and reminds you, comfort is not for people like you. Your father wears the same. Your brothers. Every man in every village you've ever seen. Hemp tunics, hemp trousers, hemp wrappings around feet that haven't known shoes since the last time someone died and left behind something wearable. The Empire grows silk by the ton. Mulberry trees stretch across whole provinces. Silkworms spin their million-mile threads in sheds that smell of boiling cocoons and patient female hands. You'll never touch it, never wear it. Never even see it up close, unless some merchant's wife passes too near on market day, and you catch a glimpse of something that looks like water frozen into fabric. Silk is for people who don't work. Silk is for people whose hands never touch dirt, whose backs never bend, whose feet never leave the courtyards where servants bring things and take things away and exist as furniture with pulses. Silk is the uniform of the pyramid's upper stones, and you are very, very low. But here's the part that keeps you awake on nights when the hunger isn't bad enough to kill sleep. Wearing the wrong thing doesn't just mark you as ambitious, it marks you as dead. The Empire has rules about fabric, not suggestions, not cultural preferences, laws, written down, enforced by men who carry sticks and enjoy using them. You think your hemp is uncomfortable? Try explaining to a magistrate why you're wearing cotton when your father wore hemp, and his father wore hemp, and his father's father wore hemp back to the beginning of your family's assigned nothingness. Cotton is for merchants, for people who have money but no status, who can afford better but aren't allowed to wear silk, so they settle for the second best thing and pretend it doesn't burn to know that scholars' servants dress better than they do. You're not a merchant. You're not even close to a merchant. You're a farmer's son who might become a farmer yourself if you survive long enough, and the gods feel generous, and the tax collector has a good year and doesn't take everything. So hemp, always hemp, forever hemp. Color matters more. You've been told this since you could understand words. Yellow is the emperor's. Not pale yellow, not golden yellow. Any yellow. All yellow. The color of sunlight, of ripe grain, of things that give life, reserved exclusively for one man who's never seen a sunrise in his life because he wakes up to concubines drawing curtains and servants bringing tea and astronomers calculating exactly when the sun will appear so he can be ready to receive it. You wear brown. Everyone wears brown. Brown like dirt. Brown like drying blood. Brown like the robes of monks who've renounced everything, including the right to complain about how brown everything is. Sometimes, on festival days, someone adds a red sash. Red for luck. Red for life. Red for the blood you'll spill if you ever forget that yellow means death. Your feet are bare. They're always bare. Shoes are for journeys, for winters, for people who can afford to protect their skin from the ground that owns them. Your soles have thickened over years into something almost leathery. You can feel every pebble, every thorn, every patch of ground that's been baked too long in the sun. You can feel the earth remembering you. And you remember it back, with every step, with every bruise, with every cut that doesn't heal fast enough before the next cut arrives. But you're male. So your feet, at least, are yours. They go where you go. They carry you to fields, to markets, to the beds of women who might bear sons, who'll wear hemp and walk barefoot and never question why. If you were female, the story would be different. If you were female, your feet would already be breaking. The binding starts young, 5, maybe 6. Before the bones harden, before the arch sets, before you learn what running feels like. Your mother, the same woman who touched your face this morning like she was saying goodbye, would take your sisters, if you had sisters, and she would bend their toes under, fold them, wrap them in strips of cloth so tight that the blood stops flowing and the bones start rearranging, and the screaming goes on for years, until eventually it stops, because the nerves die, or the girl dies, or something in between that isn't quite living anymore. They call it lotus feet. Beautiful. Delicate. The kind of feet that fit in tiny embroidered shoes and make a woman walk like she's floating, like she's not quite touching the ground, like she's too refined for something as vulgar as walking. What it actually is: broken bones, rotting flesh, infections that spread up the legs and kill slowly, permanent lameness that turns women into furniture who need to be carried, who can't run, who can't escape, who can't do anything except sit and look beautiful and hope their husband doesn't get bored. The Empire calls it beauty. The Empire calls it tradition. The Empire calls it women's business, which means men don't talk about it, which means men don't stop it, which means it keeps happening generation after generation, while scholars write poems about how graceful those tiny feet look peeking from beneath silk robes. You've seen your cousins, the ones who came back from the binding year different, quieter, their eyes looking at things that aren't there, their feet wrapped in bloody cloths that got changed every morning while they bit down on leather straps and tried not to scream, because screaming meant weakness, and weakness meant shame, and shame meant no husband, and no husband meant no purpose, and no purpose meant you might as well have been left by the river like the girls no one wanted. You don't think about it. You can't. Thinking about it leads to questions about why and how and who decided. And those questions lead to other questions. And those questions lead to places where the Empire doesn't want you going. So you wear your hemp. You walk on bare feet. You thank whatever ancestors are listening that you were born male, even though male means work and war and dying for a dynasty that doesn't know your name. Because at least your feet bend the right way. At least you can run. At least, when the Empire comes for you, and it will come, eventually, it always comes, you'll be able to meet it standing. Not kneeling. Not hobbling. Not beautiful. Alive. For now, anyway. For now, you dress. You step outside. You join your father on the path to fields you'll work until dark. And you don't look back at the house where your mother is probably wrapping someone's feet right now. Someone small. Someone whose screams you'll pretend not to hear. Because hearing means acknowledging. And acknowledging means doing something. And doing something means dying. Better not to hear. Better not to know. Better to focus on the hemp scratching your skin and the ground cutting your feet and the endless, endless work that keeps you too tired to wonder. Too tired to ask. Too tired to remember that somewhere, in a room you'll never enter, a little girl just learned that beauty costs everything. And the Empire calls it tradition. And the scholars write poems. And you keep walking. Because what else can you do? The fields stretch ahead like a promise broken before it was made. Rice paddies, flooded, green with shoots that look almost alive in the morning light, almost hopeful, almost worth the work they'll demand. You've seen this view every day since you could walk. Your father saw it before you, his father before him. Generations of your family have stood exactly here, at this same muddy edge, looking out at the same impossible expanse, knowing exactly what waits. the work. Always the work. You step in. Water closes over your ankles. Cold. Always cold, even in summer, because the mountains feed these paddies, and the mountains never warm up, never care, never stop sending meltwater down to remind you that nature doesn't negotiate. Your feet sink into mud that sucks at every step. Thick, hungry, the kind of mud that wants to keep you, that whispers stay, that makes each movement a negotiation with gravity. You bend. Your back protests immediately. Too many years of this already, and you're not even 20. Too many mornings folded over green shoots while the sun crawls across the sky like it's deliberately slow, like it wants you to feel every single minute. Your hands find the seedlings. Your fingers press them into mud. 1, 2, 3. A rhythm that becomes trance, becomes survival, becomes the only thing your body knows. Beside you, your father works without speaking. He never speaks in the fields. Words are wasted energy. Energy is food. Food is survival. The math is simple, even if the life isn't. You learn to read his silences instead. The angle of his back tells you when to speed up. The pause in his breathing tells you when to watch for overseers. The way he sometimes stops and stares at nothing tells you he's remembering things he'll never tell. The overseer appears around noon. You don't hear him coming. They never let you hear them coming, but you feel the shift. Your father's back straightens almost imperceptibly. His hands move faster. You match him without thinking. The overseer stands at the paddy's edge, a shadow against the sun, holding a stick he doesn't need to use because his presence is enough. He watches, counts, judges, makes notes on a bamboo slip that will become grain tax, become rent, become the difference between eating this winter and watching your siblings starve. He doesn't speak either. Words are for people who can afford to waste them. He moves on. You breathe again. But the relief doesn't last. It never lasts. Because as he walks away, you notice something else. Movement on the path beyond. Men, several of them, leading horses, wearing uniforms that mean government, mean authority, mean the kind of trouble that starts with questions and ends with disappearances. Your father notices too. His hand touches your arm. Just once. A warning. A prayer. A goodbye you won't understand until later. The men don't stop at your paddy. They pass by. But one of them looks at you. Directly at you. Meets your eyes for a second longer than comfort allows. You look down immediately. Too slow, always too slow. But you felt it. That look. The one that catalogues. The one that remembers faces for later, for whenever the empire needs bodies, needs labor, needs soldiers to throw at borders that keep moving, because the empire keeps expanding, and someone has to die to make that happen. They pass. You work. Your father says nothing. But something has changed. The air feels different. Heavier. Like the sky before a storm that never breaks. You keep planting. Keep bending. Keep pretending you didn't see what you saw. But you saw. And somewhere in a government office, on a bamboo slip you'll never hold, your face is being described, your age estimated, your value calculated. Because that's what you are in Imperial China. A value, a number, a unit of labor that can be moved, used, spent, discarded. The fields need planting? You plant. The army needs marching? You march. The emperor needs a new canal, a new wall, a new tomb shaped like heaven itself? You dig. You haul. You die under rocks that will become someone's eternal rest, and no one will write your name anywhere except the casualty lists that get burned at the end of the year, because paper costs money and dead peasants aren't worth the ink. By afternoon, your back has stopped complaining. It's moved past pain into something numb, something almost peaceful, something that lets your mind drift while your body works. You think about nothing. That's the goal. Thinking about nothing means not thinking about your mother's eyes this morning, not thinking about the soldier's glance, not thinking about your sister's feet, if you had a sister, if she survived, if she's still somewhere in this world of hurt and silence and endless, endless bending. You think about nothing. And then you think about the exam. You're not educated enough to take it. Your family's not rich enough to pay for tutors, for scrolls, for years of study while someone else does your work. But you've heard stories. Everyone has. The boy from a village like yours who somehow, impossibly, passed. Who climbed the pyramid. Who wears silk now and eats meat and has servants who do his bending for him. The stories spread like fever. Hopeful, contagious, dangerous. Your father catches you dreaming. Doesn't look at you. He never looks, but he knows. He always knows. And his silence says what words would cost too much to speak. Don't. Don't hope. Don't imagine. Don't think about the exam, because the exam is for other people. People whose bones were different from birth. People whose ancestors smiled on them. People who weren't born to bend and die and feed the empire with their bodies until there's nothing left to feed. You plant another seedling. And another. And another. The sun moves. The shadows lengthen. Your hands keep working, even after they've gone numb. Even after you can't feel the mud anymore. Even after you've become nothing but a machine that plants and breathes and waits for the signal to stop. The signal comes when the light fails. When you can't see the seedlings anymore. When the overseer's final round confirms that everyone is still here, still working, still too tired to run. You straighten, your back screams, you ignore it. Your father turns toward home without a word. You follow. Behind you, the fields lie silent. Seedlings in rows. Order imposed on chaos. The empire's food growing in the empire's mud. Planted by the empire's hands. Harvested by the empire's schedule. Consumed by the empire's masters. You don't look back. You never look back. Because if you looked back, you might see what you really are. Not a person, not a son, not even a farmer. Just a pair of hands attached to a stomach, attached to a back that bends. And tomorrow, it bends again. And the day after. And the day after that. Until one day, it doesn't. And somewhere, a boy just like you will plant rice in the mud you used to work. And he won't know your name, and he won't wonder about your life, and he won't ask why the empire needed you to disappear. He'll just bend. And plant. And wait for someone to look at him the way that soldier looked at you. Because in Imperial China, that's what you are. A pair of hands. Waiting to be used. Waiting to be spent. Waiting for the moment when the empire finally notices you exist. And that moment when it comes is never good.